The alien nurse gave me the wrong injection, saying, "This wasn't for humans, don't say a word." Jake didn't know much about Valkyrian medicine, but he trusted the systems of the peacekeeping mission. He had been through the protocols before. After all, the Valkyrians were known for their advanced medical technology, and their healing methods were highly regarded throughout the galaxy. He'd come to their medical facility with a simple request, a routine checkup. A bit of swelling in his shoulder from a skirmish, some bruising from the usual complications of traveling through dangerous territories. Nothing serious, just a bit of a reminder that his line of work wasn't always as glamorous as the Federation made it out to be. When he entered the sterile white hallway, the Valkyrian nurse at the front desk gave him a soft smile and gestured for him to follow her. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, with fine golden veins visible beneath the surface, an unusual feature Jake had come to expect from the alien species. But it wasn't the color that caught his attention, it was the calmness of her eyes. Valkyrians always seemed serene, even in moments of stress. "You're Jake, yes?" she asked in perfect English. Her voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. "Yeah, that's me," Jake replied, his voice still hoarse from the previous mission's chaos. He wiped a hand over his face, trying to shake off the fatigue that had begun to set in. He had barely gotten any sleep since arriving on the Valkyrian homeworld, but the checkup would be quick. The nurse, whose name tag read Neris, nodded and motioned for him to follow her into an adjacent room. The medical chamber was pristine, white walls reflecting soft ambient lighting. A few sleek machines hummed in the background, their holographic readouts displaying streams of data in alien languages. Neris gestured for him to sit on the bed, a smooth metallic surface that seemed to shift slightly beneath him as if it were adjusting to his weight. He slid off his jacket and settled into the seat, running a hand through his short hair. "Just a quick exam today?" she asked, her voice soft. Jake nodded. "A bit of pain in my shoulder, nothing too bad." Neris stepped closer to him and began scanning his shoulder with a small device. The screen flickered a few times, showing the deep bruises and small contusions, but no serious injury. Neris raised an eyebrow as she studied the data. "You've been through quite a bit of stress, haven't you?" she asked. Jake couldn't help but chuckle. "Yeah, that's kind of the job." She didn't smile back. Instead, she tapped the device in her hand a few times as if contemplating something. "I'll get you an injection. It should ease the pain quickly." Jake felt a twinge of unease but pushed it down. He had been injected 1,000 times before, vaccines, painkillers, various things for his line of work. But there was something about Neris that felt different, something almost secretive in the way she moved. She left the room for a moment, returning with a syringe filled with a glowing blue liquid. The needle was unusually thin, almost delicate in appearance. She didn't say a word, simply gesturing for him to hold still. Jake tensed slightly, but only for a moment. He had been trained to handle far worse, so a quick shot didn't faze him. But as Neris slid the needle into his arm, something unexpected happened. The moment the serum entered his bloodstream, Jake felt a deep warmth spread from his shoulder all the way down to his fingers. It was not the normal sensation of medicine moving through the body. It was far more intense, almost foreign. He let out a sharp breath, feeling a strange pressure building inside him, and his muscles began to stiffen. His heart raced faster than usual, a feeling of panic spreading through his chest. Before he could ask her what the hell was going on, Neris spoke again, her tone quieter now. "This wasn't for humans," she murmured, almost as if to herself. Jake's confusion deepened, and he tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come. It felt like his throat had closed, as if a heavy weight was pressing down on it. He could only stare at Neris, who was watching him with a strange look in her eyes. She seemed unfazed, almost detached. "Don't say a word," she continued, her eyes narrowing. "Just breathe." Jake's hands gripped the sides of the bed as the heat inside him began to rise. Sweat beaded on his forehead and his body felt heavy, as if gravity had increased tenfold. His vision blurred, and a strange, dizzying sensation twisted inside his head. Was it the serum? Was it supposed to do this? "Wah, what did you do to me?" Jake tried to croak, but the words barely left his lips, muffled by the tightening in his throat. Neris stepped closer, her face unreadable. "The Valkyrians have used this serum for centuries. It's designed to enhance our physical capabilities, make us more resistant to injury and fatigue, but it was never meant for humans." She hesitated. "I never intended for this to happen." Jake's mind struggled to make sense of the words. The warmth in his veins was growing into something far worse. He felt as though his muscles were expanding, his skin stretching to the point of pain. His heart thundered in his chest, and his vision became sharper, almost painfully so. "What's happening?" Jake finally managed to rasp out. "The serum," Neris whispered, her voice colder now. "It's reacting to your biology. This is not supposed to happen. Humans aren't supposed to have this ability." Suddenly, Jake could hear the faintest sounds outside the room, footsteps echoing down the hall, distant chatter. His hearing had sharpened, every detail becoming clear and crisp. His thoughts were racing, but his body felt like it was going to explode. "Neris, you need to stop this," Jake said urgently, his voice still tight. He was beginning to lose control over his own body, his hands clenching and unclenching involuntarily, muscles twitching. Neris hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the door. "I can't," she replied. "The serum, it's beyond my control now. I was only supposed to monitor you, but I've made a mistake." Jake tried to push himself up, his body feeling like it was shaking with power, unnatural power. But every time he moved, the sensation grew more intense. His heart raced even faster, and he could feel his blood pounding through his veins like a wild river. His entire body screamed with energy, and yet he felt trapped inside it. "I need to help you," Neris said, her voice softening. But it was clear she was no longer in control of the situation. Jake wanted to scream, to demand answers, but his throat was locked, his body rebelling against him. He could feel every movement of the room around him now, the slightest shift in the air. The sensation of overwhelming strength continued to rise, as though his very cells were about to burst. He could only sit there helpless as Neris watched him, her eyes wide with regret and fear. Jake could feel his heart pounding in his chest, faster and faster, as if it were trying to escape his body. He clenched his fists, trying to hold onto something, anything, that would help him ground himself in the reality of the moment. But the world around him was slipping away, distorting, stretching, and twisting as his senses became too sharp, too overwhelming. His skin felt hot, almost like he was burning from the inside out. The sweat that poured from his forehead wasn't just from the heat, it was from the effort of trying to keep control of his own body. Neris was still standing next to him, watching with a look of both fear and regret in her eyes. But Jake couldn't focus on her face anymore. He couldn't focus on anything other than the sensations coursing through him, drowning out everything else. His muscles were tightening, expanding with an unnatural force. He could feel the blood rushing through his veins, his pulse loud in his ears. Every tiny noise in the room seemed deafening now. His breathing was erratic. He tried to calm himself, but his lungs felt tight, as if they were being squeezed from all sides. "Neris," he managed to rasp, his voice barely a whisper, strained from the pressure building in his throat. "What's happening to me?" Neris stepped back, her eyes widening, as if realizing just how out of control this situation had become. She reached for a small device at her side, tapping a few buttons before holding it up to his chest. Jake could feel the cool touch of the device against his skin, but it did little to calm the feverish heat that had taken over him. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she repeated, her voice laced with guilt. "The serum was designed for Valkyrians. Our bodies are not compatible with yours." Jake's mind was racing. Serum. He could barely process the word as his body continued to thrum with a wild, uncontrollable energy. What had she done to him? What had she injected into his veins? Neris continued to scan his body with the device, her fingers trembling slightly as she worked. "It was supposed to help you," she said, as if trying to convince herself. "It was supposed to enhance your strength, speed, endurance, things that would have been useful in your line of work. But this reaction is beyond anything we expected." Jake's head was spinning, his thoughts becoming fragmented and incoherent. Every part of him was overwhelmed, but at the same time there was a sense of power, raw, untapped power that surged through his every nerve. He had never felt anything like it in his life. "Get me out of here," Jake forced through clenched teeth. He tried to move, to stand up, but his body betrayed him. His legs felt like they were filled with lead, heavy and uncooperative. Every time he tried to push himself off the bed, his muscles would lock up, his body fighting against him. Neris stepped closer, her hand hovering near his shoulder as though she wanted to help but didn't know how. I can't stop it now," she admitted, her voice full of uncertainty. "If I could, I would. I need to get you to a secure location, somewhere safe." This is dangerous, not just for you, but for all of us." Jake tried to look at her, his vision still blurred, his eyes stinging from the pressure of whatever was coursing through his system. What are you talking about?" Neris hesitated, biting her lip. "The serum was never meant to be used on humans," she repeated. "We've seen what it can do to other species, but your biology, it's different. The serum is interacting with your cells in ways we never predicted. It's enhancing your physical capabilities, but it's also causing extreme strain on your body. If we don't control this, it could kill you." Jake felt his breath catch in his chest. "What do you mean, kill me?" She didn't answer right away, her eyes darting nervously to the door, as though she feared someone was listening. "The serum was designed to give us the upper hand, to make us better, stronger, faster. But it wasn't supposed to make us," she paused, as if she couldn't bring herself to say the words. "It wasn't supposed to make us too powerful." Jake's heart was pounding louder now. He tried to focus, tried to get a grip on the situation, but everything felt like it was slipping through his fingers. "I don't understand," he said, his voice hoarse. "What the hell did you give me?" Neris took a deep breath, her expression tense. "The serum was supposed to enhance your physical strength, yes, but it also works on your body's natural healing processes. It was meant to speed up your recovery time, help you regenerate cells faster. Velcarians have been using it for generations. It makes us resilient. But your body," she glanced at him, and Jake could see the fear in her eyes. "Your body can't handle it the same way ours can." Jake closed his eyes, trying to control the dizziness that was making everything spin. He was starting to understand the weight of her words. The serum wasn't just a tool for healing, it was something far more dangerous, something that could break him apart if it wasn't controlled. "What happens now?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to get you to a facility," Neris said, her tone now urgent. "We need to stabilize you before it's too late. I'll take you to the medical wing where we can monitor your vitals, but I'm afraid that might not be enough. This serum is too volatile. If it continues to react this way, it could destroy you from the inside." Jake swallowed hard, the fear creeping up his spine. He didn't know if he could trust Neris anymore. She had made a mistake, one that could very well cost him his life. He couldn't afford to let fear control him now, not when he still didn't fully understand what was happening to him. "I'll take my chances," he muttered, forcing himself to sit up on the bed. "I'm not dying here." Neris hesitated, her eyes scanning his face for any sign of weakness, but there was none. Jake could feel the energy in his body, too much, too fast, and he knew that if he didn't do something soon, it would tear him apart. He needed answers. He needed control. Before she could stop him, Jake swung his legs over the edge of the bed and stood up, his knees wobbling beneath him. His entire body screamed with the effort, but he pushed through it. The room around him seemed to tilt, the walls closing in as the pressure inside him continued to rise. He gritted his teeth against the pain, determined to move. "Jake, wait!" Neris started to protest, but he ignored her. He couldn't stay here. Not when there was still a chance to find a solution. He wasn't going to let whatever this serum was destroy him. He had survived worse than this. He had to. "Where do we go?" he demanded, his voice low and steady despite the storm inside him. Neris looked at him for a long moment, as if assessing whether he could handle what was coming next. Finally, she nodded. "Follow me," she said. "I know a place where we can stabilize you, but you have to trust me, Jake, if this goes wrong." "I'll deal with it," Jake interrupted, his eyes locking onto hers. He could feel the energy surging inside him like a beast ready to break free. But he couldn't lose control, not yet. Together, they moved quickly through the sterile corridors of the medical facility. Jake could barely focus on where they were going, his mind spinning with the knowledge that his body was becoming something else, something stronger but also more dangerous. He had to keep it together. He couldn't let Neris see him break down, not when his life was hanging in the balance. Every step felt like a struggle, each breath a laborious effort, but Jake pushed forward. He had no choice. Jake felt the air around him thrum with energy as he walked down the hallway, each step feeling more like a battle against the overwhelming power that surged through his veins. His muscles felt like they were wound tight, like springs on the edge of snapping. The world seemed too sharp, every noise too loud, every movement too fast. He had never felt anything like this before. Neris was ahead of him, her steps quick and purposeful, but Jake could tell she was watching him closely, checking his every move. He had to admit, despite his own rising panic, there was a strange part of him that could sense her concern. It wasn't just the serum that had changed things, it was everything. His senses were heightened in ways he couldn't even explain. The soft hum of the facility's power systems was like a roar in his ears. The faint rustle of fabric in the hallway seemed as clear as if someone was standing right next to him. "What did you mean by volatility?" Jake asked, his voice still rasping. He had been too focused on keeping his body in check to really absorb what Neris had said before, but now he needed answers. Neris glanced over her shoulder, her face tight with worry. "The serum was meant to make Valkyrians stronger, more resilient. It speeds up our healing, boosts our strength, and enhances our endurance. It works because Valkyrians' biology is able to handle it." Jake's steps faltered for a moment as he tried to process the information. He had always known the Valkyrians were physically superior to humans, but this was something else entirely. The idea that he had something inside him that could make him stronger, faster, more powerful, he didn't know whether to be afraid or to embrace it. "But you said it wasn't meant for humans," he continued, pushing himself to keep up with Neris. His legs felt like lead, but the fire inside him burned hotter with each passing second. "No," Neris replied, her voice colder now. Your biology is different. Our cells respond to the serum's formula, but humans, your cells are reacting to it in unpredictable ways. It's amplifying everything, Jake. Your physical strength, your senses, everything is being pushed to extremes. If we don't stop it, your body could break down." Jake tried to imagine that, tried to understand what it meant for him. His hands clenched into fists, and his mind raced as the unfamiliar energy inside him swelled. His vision sharpened to an almost painful degree. He could see the faint pulse of the lights in the hallway, the subtle movement of air as people passed by the entrance to the rooms. He could even hear their heartbeats, their breathing. It was overwhelming, dizzying, and for a moment he thought he might collapse under the strain. "I don't know how to stop it," Neris said quietly, almost to herself. "I only know that the longer it goes on, the harder it will be to control." Jake's pulse quickened, and a sense of urgency began to settle over him. "Then we need to hurry." Neris nodded and turned a corner, leading him into a larger room. This one was different from the sterile medical chambers. They were deeper inside the facility now. There was more equipment, more advanced machines that hummed with a quiet power. Jake could sense the difference in the air, too. It felt thicker, heavier, as though the atmosphere itself was charged with energy. "Here," Neris said, moving toward one of the large consoles. She began to type rapidly, her fingers moving across the touch-sensitive screen with practiced ease. "This is the stabilization chamber. It's designed for Valkyrian patients, but it can be adapted for humans. It should help mitigate some of the side effects." Jake wanted to ask more questions, but his mind was too distracted by the power within him. He could feel his heartbeat thudding in his ears, like a drum that wouldn't stop. He was struggling to keep his body still, to not let it explode with the strength he could feel building inside. The pressure in his chest was unbearable. As Neris worked, Jake staggered toward one of the chairs near the chamber. He had to sit down. He had to stop himself from moving. He didn't know how much longer he could hold it together. But just as he was about to sit, the world around him seemed to blur. A deep, primal urge surged within him, and for a brief moment he could have sworn that the air itself was vibrating, that the walls were shaking. "Jake!" Neris's voice was a distant echo in his ears. He could hear the panic in her tone, but it was as though everything was happening in slow motion. He reached out to grab the chair, but his hand shot past it, moving with an unnatural speed. He could feel the energy inside him growing, twisting, tightening around his limbs like a coil ready to snap. In a blind panic, he swung his arm toward the nearest wall, his fist connecting with the surface. The impact was so powerful that the entire room seemed to tremble. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the place where his fist had struck. The wall had buckled, the metal groaning as if it were a sheet of paper torn by his strength. The force of it had nearly knocked him off his feet, but instead he stood there, panting, trying to control the overwhelming surge of power. "What the hell is happening to me?" Jake gasped, his voice thick with fear. He could feel the wild energy inside him, ready to tear everything apart. Neris stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. She looked at the damaged wall, then back at Jake, her face pale. "It's worse than I thought. The serum wasn't just enhancing your strength, It's amplifying your reflexes, your speed. Your body is reacting to the stimulus before your brain can process it. Jake clenched his fists, willing himself to regain control. I didn't do that on purpose, he said, his voice low. I don't know how to control this. You need to calm down, Jake, Nara said, her voice soft but urgent. She stepped closer, her hand outstretched as if she could somehow help him. If you don't, this will get worse. You're already too far gone to stop it on your own. Jake wanted to argue, but his thoughts were a blur. He could feel his muscles flexing, his veins bulging beneath his skin. His body was on the edge of breaking apart. He could feel it. It was like there was too much power inside him, too much raw force. And all he wanted to do was get it under control. I don't want to hurt anyone, Jake whispered, his chest heaving with each breath. You won't, Neris assured him. But you need to focus. If you keep letting the serum take over, it'll only get worse. We have to get you into the stabilization chamber. Now, Jake nodded, trying to focus on the sound of her voice. Slowly, carefully, he forced himself to take a step toward the chamber. Each movement felt like it was happening in a different world, a world where everything was too fast, too intense, and too real. Neris quickly led him toward the chamber's entrance, where a low hum greeted them. As they approached, the large doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the chamber looked almost like a large glass pod with intricate machinery surrounding it. The air inside seemed to shimmer with energy, and Jake could feel it pulsing, just like the power in his own body. Step inside, Neris instructed, her voice calm but filled with urgency. Jake stepped into the pod, feeling the cool air wash over him as he stood in the center. He could hear the machine's soft whirring, but it was nothing compared to the roar of blood in his ears, the pounding of his heart that felt like it was going to burst from his chest. He clenched his fists again, trying to keep his body from exploding with energy. Neris activated the machine, and the pod slowly began to close around him. As the walls of glass slid into place, Jake could feel the pressure building around him, both physical and mental. His heart was still racing, but he knew he had to try. He had to calm down before it was too late. The machine hummed louder now, the air inside growing warmer. Jake closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe slowly. He focused on Neris's words, on the sound of her voice, trying to center himself. He had to hold it together. He had to. Jake felt his pulse in his temples as the walls of the chamber began to close around him. The air felt thick, suffocating almost. He could feel the pressure building within his chest, his body already feeling like it was being stretched too thin. The walls of the glass pod seemed to hum with an energy that mirrored the chaos inside his body. As the pod sealed shut, a soft whirring sound filled the air, and a series of soft lights flickered on, bathing the space in a pale glow. He could see Neris through the transparent walls, standing by the control panel, her face tense with worry. But her calm demeanor did nothing to reassure him. The energy in his veins was wild, like a fire that refused to be put out. You have to focus, Jake. Neris's voice came through the speaker, faint but clear. You need to control it. If you don't, the serum could keep amplifying the changes. The pressure inside you will break you apart. Jake nodded, though he wasn't sure if she could see him. He didn't have much choice but to try. His entire body was vibrating with energy, his muscles locked in a constant state of tension. It felt like there was a storm inside him, one he couldn't control. He had always been in control of his own actions. As a soldier, he'd trained to handle the worst situations: alien combat, zero-gravity operations, extreme environments. He'd survived injuries, hostile environments, and countless other dangers. But this was different. He wasn't facing an enemy he could shoot or fight. This was something deep inside him, something he couldn't see or touch. He closed his eyes, trying to focus. The world around him seemed to grow more distorted, each sound and movement too loud, too intense. He could hear his heartbeat, each thud sending a shock through his chest. His breath was shallow, quick, as if he couldn't get enough air. The pressure building in his head was becoming unbearable, and it felt like he was being crushed from the inside. The lights above him flickered again, and suddenly he felt a strange warmth spreading through his arms and legs, like a surge of electricity. He gasped, his muscles contracting painfully as the strength inside him threatened to break free. He could feel the energy inside him, almost like a physical thing, pushing against the limits of his body. Jake, Neris's voice crackled over the intercom, her tone now urgent. You need to calm down, focus on your breathing, deep breaths, slow down. If you keep going like this, it won't stop. You'll tear yourself apart. The words echoed in his mind, but they seemed distant, muffled by the raging storm inside his chest. He couldn't focus. He couldn't think. His body was trembling with the force of the changes, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The muscles in his arms strained, his body wanting to explode with power. I can't stop it, Jake shouted, his voice cracking as the pressure inside him grew. The words felt like they were being forced from his mouth, as if they had no choice but to come out. The energy within him was too powerful, too intense. He couldn't control it. The chamber seemed to pulse with a deep, low vibration, and Jake could feel the walls of the pod vibrating as well. It was as if the entire facility was alive with energy, reacting to the chaos inside him. His breath came in shallow bursts, and every heartbeat felt like it was going to be his last. Jake, listen to me, Nara said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. You have to trust me, focus. This is your only chance. You can survive this. You just have to find a way to control it. Don't let it control you. Jake clenched his eyes shut, trying to block out the overwhelming sensations that were pushing him to the edge. He focused on her voice, trying to latch onto it as a lifeline. He had to calm down. He had to regain control, but it was so hard. His body was shaking uncontrollably, and every muscle in him felt like it was about to snap. He could feel the energy flowing through him, building, intensifying. His hands twitched, his fingers curling and uncurling involuntarily. He could hear the blood rushing in his ears, the deafening roar of it almost drowning out Neris's words. He needed to focus. But focus on what? How could he control something that felt so wild, so untamed? It was like a force of nature, and he was just a man trying to keep it in check. I'm trying, Jake muttered through gritted teeth. I'm trying, Neris. He took a deep breath, though it felt like it wasn't enough to fill his lungs. He tried again, this time slower, focusing on the air moving through his chest. The room around him felt suffocating, but he pushed through the discomfort, forcing his mind to focus on the rhythm of his breath. Slowly, bit by bit, the world around him began to quiet. The chaos inside his body didn't stop, but it began to settle, becoming less of a storm and more of a pulsing wave. He focused on that wave, the rhythm of it, and tried to control it. You're doing good, Jake, Nara said, her voice soft and steady. Keep going, keep breathing. Jake's body was still trembling, but he could feel the surge of power inside him becoming more manageable, more contained. It was like he had found the rhythm of the storm inside him, and for the first time, he could hear it instead of being consumed by it. The chamber seemed to grow still around him. The vibrating walls slowed. His breathing came a little easier. His muscles, which had been straining against his skin, began to relax, and the pressure in his chest began to fade. But even as the storm inside him quieted, Jake knew it wasn't over. The serum had done something to him, something that was beyond his control. He couldn't keep it in check forever. He could feel the power still there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the next moment to break free. Is it working? Jake asked, his voice hoarse from the effort. He opened his eyes and looked around, still feeling the residual tension in his limbs. Yes, Neris replied, her voice now full of relief. You're stabilizing. It's not perfect, but it's enough for now. You need to rest. The serum's effects won't wear off immediately, but if we can keep you stable, we can figure out a way to reverse it. Jake let out a long, shaky breath, his body sagging with exhaustion. His muscles felt like they had been stretched too thin, and every part of him screamed for rest. But he knew he couldn't afford to relax completely. He had to stay alert. He had to stay alive. Reverse it, Jake repeated, his mind still foggy. How do you reverse something like this? I don't know yet, Nara said, her voice full of uncertainty. But I'll find a way. You're the first human to have this reaction. No one knows what will happen. I just need time. Jake closed his eyes again, trying to focus on the steady rhythm of his breathing. The storm inside him had quieted for now, but he knew this wasn't over. The serum had changed him. He was different now. Stronger, yes, but at what cost? And more importantly, what would happen if he couldn't control it the next time? He didn't have the answers, but he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Jake lay in the stabilization pod, his body still trembling with the residual energy of the serum. He could feel his muscles still twitching, a faint, almost electrical hum running through his veins. The worst of the storm inside him had passed, but the calm was deceptive. He knew it wouldn't last. The serum had altered him in ways he couldn't even begin to understand, and he wasn't sure how long he could keep it under control. Nara stood just outside the pod, watching him through the transparent walls. Her expression was tense, filled with a mixture of concern and something else. Regret, maybe. Jake couldn't blame her. She had made a mistake, a huge one, and now it was his life that was on the line. He was a test subject for a serum never meant for humans, and there was no guarantee it wouldn't kill him before they could figure out how to reverse it. He let out a long, shaky breath, his chest still tight with the effects of the serum. It was like his entire body had been electrified, and the aftershocks were lingering in his muscles, in his bones. Every part of him felt like it was on edge, like he was about to burst open at any second. But he couldn't let himself break. He couldn't lose control, not yet. The air in the room felt heavy, almost thick with tension. Naris was still standing there, waiting for him to speak, waiting for him to ask questions. But what could he ask? He didn't even know where to begin. What was he supposed to say when he didn't understand what was happening to him? "How do I stop it?" Jake asked finally, his voice rough from the strain of speaking. He looked over at Naris, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and fear. "How do I stop this from getting worse?" Naris's gaze softened, and she took a step closer to the pod, pressing her hand against the glass. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "The serum's effects on humans are unprecedented. It's not something we were prepared for. I didn't think it would happen like this." Jake's mind raced. He was angry, but there was no one to direct that anger at. Naris hadn't meant for any of this to happen. But that didn't change the fact that he was stuck here, trapped in his own body, fighting against something he couldn't control. He closed his eyes, his body still vibrating with energy. The storm inside him wasn't gone. It was just dormant, waiting for the next trigger. He could feel it in his muscles, in his bones, in his blood. It was like there was a beast inside him, pacing, waiting for the right moment to break free. "What happens if I can't control it?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I lose it?" Naris hesitated for a moment before answering. "If you lose control, the serum will keep amplifying your physical abilities. You'll become stronger, faster, but it will also tear your body apart. Your cells won't be able to handle the strain. It will push you beyond your limits until your body can't take it anymore." Jake's heart skipped a beat. That was the reality he was facing. He wasn't just fighting against the serum, he was fighting against his own body. And every time he pushed too hard, every time the energy inside him flared up, it was getting closer to breaking him. "I don't know how to keep this under control," Jake muttered. "Every time I try to calm down, it gets worse. I can't even think straight anymore." "You're not alone in this," Naris said softly, her voice full of determination. "We'll find a way to fix it, I promise. I'll find a way to reverse the effects, but I need your help." Jake turned his head slightly, his gaze locked onto hers. "What do you mean, how can I help?" "I've been studying the Valkyrian physiology for years," Naris explained. "I know how the serum works, what it's supposed to do, and how it affects us. But humans, your bodies are different. I need to learn more about how your body is reacting to the serum. I need to understand what it's doing to you before we can figure out how to reverse it." Jake frowned, the weight of her words settling heavily on his chest. "So you're saying you need more data on me?" "More tests?" He didn't like the sound of that, but at this point, what other choice did he have? "Yes," Naris said. "We'll have to run tests, figure out how the serum is interacting with your cells. But I can't do this alone. You need to help me understand what's happening. I'll do everything I can to stabilize you, but I can't promise it will be easy." Jake sat up in the pod, the slight pressure in his chest intensifying as his body reacted to the change. He could feel the energy inside him rising again, responding to the movement, the change in position. It was like a switch had been flipped, and suddenly he felt the familiar heat building in his veins again. But this time he was ready for it. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. He had to control it. He had to stay in control. "I'll help," Jake said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "But we need to do this fast. I don't know how much longer I can keep it together." Naris nodded and pressed a few buttons on the control panel. The pod slowly opened, and she stepped back as Jake climbed out. His legs wobbled slightly, but he didn't stumble. He was still aware of every movement, every inch of his body, as if his senses had been dialed up to a level he couldn't ignore. "Follow me," Naris said, leading him down another hallway, her pace quick as if she knew that time was running out. The facility was eerily quiet now, the hum of the machines echoing through the sterile halls. There were no other people around, just the soft click of their footsteps. They arrived at a small laboratory deep inside the facility. It was filled with various machines, blinking monitors, and shelves lined with unfamiliar vials and medical instruments. Naris gestured for Jake to sit on the examination table in the center of the room. He did so reluctantly, his body still tense as he tried to suppress the power threatening to explode within him. "I need to monitor your vitals," Naris said as she attached several sensors to his skin. "This is going to take a while. I need to track the changes in real time." Jake nodded, doing his best to stay still. The sensors were cold against his skin, but the sensation was barely noticeable compared to the fire that still burned in his veins. As Naris worked, Jake's mind wandered. He thought about everything that had led him here. His mission, the strange encounter with the Valkyrians, the moment he had trusted Naris. He had been a soldier his whole life, trained for war, trained for survival, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. Nothing had prepared him for the feeling of being out of control of his own body, for the fear that came with the knowledge that something inside him was changing, something that could tear him apart at any moment. "Your heart rate is stabilizing," Naris said, breaking his thoughts. "That's a good sign. The serum is still active, but your body is adjusting." Jake let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "So I'm not going to die today." "Not today," Naris said, offering him a small, reassuring smile. "But we need to keep monitoring you. I don't know what the long-term effects will be, but for now, we can slow it down. We can keep you from losing control." Jake nodded, his chest tightening with both relief and fear. "What happens when it's all over?" he asked quietly. Naris paused, her gaze lingering on him. "I don't know, but I won't stop until I figure it out. I'll make sure we find a way to undo this, Jake." "You won't be a test subject forever. You'll get your life back." Jake believed her, for now that was enough.